Merging with simulator in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone. So, my name is Juliana V. I am a second-year sociology student in the ACID sequence, and I wanted to give a brief rundown of the following conversation that I had with my supervisor from Lacy Consulting Services, the very wonderful Anna Barboza. This is a long and winding podcast episode, but I hope you will strap in and enjoy. By giving a nod to the likes of the Midnight Gospel and Duncan Trussell's Family Hour, in this episode, we discuss the concept of community and friendship, including the boundaries and parameters of these relationships. We talk about the challenges of navigating individualistic tendencies in friendships and communities, particularly for BIPOC individuals who often rely on reciprocity and mutual support. We then go on to touch on the experiences of living between worlds as immigrant children and the importance of creating a sense of home and community for oneself. We talk about boundaries and cultural values, particularly in relation to the American dream, and the pressure to say yes to everything in certain cultures. We acknowledge the complexity of these issues and the need for ongoing conversation and reflection. What's more is that we talk about our experiences with travel and work abroad, highlighting the importance of social components in conservation and human resources. Anna shares her diverse background, and then we talk about the intersection of resource management, of conservation, and the human dimension, recognizing the historical violence and exclusion of BIPOC communities in these spaces. There's frustration that's expressed with the recent trends of environmental organizations acknowledging these issues only after extreme events and call for genuine efforts to address them. We talked about the challenges and importance of doing DEIJ work, the need for community, and the ongoing nature of revolution, maybe even the incomplete nature. We've also discussed the difficulty of ending something that does not have an ending. So without further ado, hope that you enjoy this conversation and all the winding turns it takes, and find something that you can get out of it.
Okay, so I'm kind of taking it just to make sure I interpret it correctly. It should be a no.
It's a no for me, but again, I take it with a massive grain of salt because I've only ever heard what Fatima is saying and also like my brief experiences there. This most recent one, I'm just like, what the heck? Like, this is an American city? Like, this is the second largest city in the United States, and it just is completely broken down. Like, I'm just talking from like a city perspective, right? The infrastructure is not made for people, it's made for cars. Therefore, like, it's very dangerous to even be a pedestrian, right? Because people don't know how to drive. There's not crosswalks at legitimate crosswalk places. Like, literally, it's like a city that was made by a car. They hired a car to plan the city. A transformer. Actually, no, not even a transformer. They hired the cast of cars to make the city because you have no idea what it's like to be on two legs. So literally, like, yeah, it makes no sense. The amount of time we almost got hit was absolutely crazy. Yeah, it was, and it's like on crosswalks too. Like, literally, it's so crazy. The amount of car accidents we almost saw because everyone's so scared to make a left-hand turn. So wild. I was there for like 3 days.
Okay, thank you, because now I'm like, maybe I'll just go to visit, and even then, part of me is like, I'm going to circle back to my initial aversion to LA. There are like, I think it's Inclusive Action for the City. There are some cool organizations out there. They, of course, put out a promo video that made it seem like, and I'm sure in pockets of LA, like LA County is huge. I didn't realize until I looked at them out. But almost, this probably wouldn't be like the city of LA, but just there was something in it for me, I guess, be it LA or not, wherever I end up, whatever it might look like. I do really think about my community in Tanzania with the story of just like there is such a draw, and I don't think I'll ever be the same after experiencing place-based community to that level, where it's something that I really seek out despite being as much of a homebody as I am. I'm hoping though that right now I'm in grad school and stuff, but like once I have, like let me dream of like having a job that I can just detach from, and then like you were saying, like know my neighbors and go out and do these things and like be in community, have community gardens, be able to just interact with people in a much less sterile way that I feel a lot of. I can't say a lot of America, but a lot of my experience stateside has been of like, people don't even generally like talk to you in grocery stores. That's why I love when people talk to me in grocery stores. You like have a nice little laugh. I'm like, that was really wholesome because it doesn't happen a lot. And I'm like, I can't believe like food, particularly too, like food, markets. I think that this is a really big arena where people can come together and just, I love it. I love like seeing people and like having kids run around and the person and that other person, and it feels nice. And so I don't know where that is going to be geographically. I don't know if it's going to be stateside. I don't know if it's going to be international, transnational, in the borderlands. Who knows? But it's like very much the pull of like I want to be in community and then grappling with like, okay, so of the communities that I belong to, which do I choose? But I don't know. Part of me is like, maybe this is a good time where I will introduce myself to the podcast. I'm like after 15 minutes and some breaks, and then I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself, and we will get into this. Ultimately, we'll pull out a theme and say, hey, this is what we talked about. It just took an entire conversation to get there. But for those listening and tuning in, my name is Juliana V. I am a second-year sociology graduate student through the Stevenson Starr's program for community and economic development. My placement is at Lacy Consulting Services, a completely virtual and BIPOC-led, predominantly BIPOC-driven organization that focuses on, the tagline is generally like environmental social science, but I like to think about it as social science for environmental organizations. With me today is Anna Barboza. I will let her introduce herself, and you can go for it.
Thank you for the introduction, and that was a really good explanation of Lacy Consulting Services. Yes, I am Anna Barboza, and I'm one of the inclusivity social scientists, formerly also known as environmental social scientists at Lacy Consulting Services. I've been with them for exactly 1 year now. I literally started last
anniversary.
night.
Oh my god!
I know, it's so crazy, and I had just moved into my other apartment as well. So.
Amazing. Crazy.
And that's pretty
go ahead. I do data management loosely, but because I do, I'm in the social program, that's why I fit so nicely into the wonderful social science department. And for what it is worth, as applicable as it can be to this space and conversation, I am a daughter of Colombian immigrants, so I am Latina. Was born in the U.S., and so much of my lived experience has been U.S.-centric. I did Peace Corps after undergrad. I was in Tanzania and did sustainable agriculture. I have lots of thoughts about Peace Corps. I am definitely one to problematize the, is it an institution, organization, mission of it? But not to get unwieldy, I did just want to bring up that I was Latina. I will let Anna, if you feel comfortable, to identify yourself however you may want to, and then we can dive into or continue diving into these conversations.
Nice. Well, Leander asked us to do this once too on a call with clients, and I'm still not used to doing that with clients. Like, so yeah, I'm like, I don't want these people knowing that much about me. But anyways, here it's totally fine. Also, child, first gen kid, third culture kid. My mom is from Mexico and my dad is from Brazil. Me and my brother were both raised in the United States, and I've lived most of my 20s outside of the United States, so that is a different lens that I apply to a lot of my thinking. I've now realized that it has really impacted a lot of my thinking. So yeah, I do identify with Latina, and queer. So I'm working on that Latin X, figuring out which letter goes there. But yeah, that's been everything. And a recent San Diego transplant. So
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I think then let's circle back to the conversation we were having that I most rudely and abruptly had to switch gears in, but about this friend in San Diego.
Where to go from here? Another question that's been coming up in my move is the concept of community and what are the boundaries of friendship and essentially community, right? Not to self-disclose too much, but for example, my roommate who is living with me immediately, I've known her for 15 years. She's literally one of my best friends. And she and I align on like a lot of just everything, core values, right? Then I have a friend that essentially not that I moved here for her, but definitely she was a factor in deciding to move to San Diego because she is a good friend. Speak every day, pretty much virtually, stuff like that. I know her from college. In the process of this move, though, she has not been, I can't say like, just not as supportive as I would be if the tables have turned. So a discussion that me and my roommate have had are what is the concept of community and what is the concept of friendship, and are you allowed to have friends that do not fit that construct? And I don't know if this is too far away from the topic, but I think it could be applied to BIPOC people within the scientific sphere, BIPOC people within just like social science and stuff like that, or just working in the DAIJ space. Because, for example, we've had clients who are also BIPOC and don't really get it. Like the girls that get it, the girls that don't. And so I feel like it's an interesting example of like, you'll be like, I thought we were all on the same page here. And then you kind of flesh it out and you realize, oh, wait, like everybody has their different understandings of what this is. So that's like another topic that we do.
No, absolutely. Especially because the program that I am in, it is community and economic development. And so while there is a lot to say about both, especially economic development, like what does that mean? Capitalistic society, trying to break away from that? Are we trying to enforce it at the institutional and educational level? But community development, like, is a big thing. Particularly doing the work that we do, Lacy Consulting Services, like, how do we do these? And like, EPAC is community parameters for it, and towing the line of like, how do we engage while understanding that the community is not a monolith? So like, almost problematizing our work, which is probably beyond the scope of this little session. But no, I love it. I love to, can I get more details about like the friend in San Diego in terms of background almost? Because I feel, or just to make sure I'm not misunderstanding, is this also someone who has like similar identities to yours or like shared identities?
very different identities. Sam is a cis-het white woman. She lives in San Diego for the last 2 years. She has a dog. We really bond on, like, outdoors. I would say that she very much is an open-minded individual and that she'll hear it, but she might not necessarily identify with it. She'll respect it as well. She'll hear it, respect it, but then she might not necessarily identify it. I would say in the ways that we deviate is she's a little bit more moderate than I am. I distinctly remember going on my tangent of free, everything should be free, healthcare, housing, everything should be free. And she was like, wait, what? And I was like, wait, what? So we're in the tech industry for a startup called Cerebral. You might know them. They're like pretty big mental health space startup. And so, yeah, I think her working in corporate America, specifically the startup game, has influenced her ideas, which, like, it just is a fact, right? Like, if you work in that space, definitely it influenced your ideas on productivity, efficiency, stuff like that. And I think some of this has, I don't know when exactly she kind of turned more individualistic. I think, like, some of it I already registered and knew of because she's lived alone for a really long time, for like the 2 years. And, like, I think even before that, in the pandemic, she lived alone. And so I think with that comes a lot of, like, I will do things myself, and therefore I expect people to do things themselves as well. So, yeah.
The ease with which we can almost absorb, like, these individualistic tendencies, I think in part because of everything that surrounds us and, like, that mentality, and why, particularly for, maybe, like, we don't have to take the conversation in this direction, but right, like, that's a lot of what capitalism focuses on as a mode of production, of, like, raising the individual. It's not capitalism, maybe I'll take that back, for sure neoliberalism, of, like, let's put it on the individual. It's individual merit, it's individual work. This is what makes everything work. So I can see how in that space your friend is, if you're not on the lookout for it, how easy it is to, like, absorb just, like, this mentality of, like, no, other people should be able to do for themselves what I did for myself. Or have I, like, misinterpreted in any way, kind of her vibe?
Yeah, it might be like a subconscious thing, honestly. But, like, for example, just like small things, like, yeah, like, just like small things of boundaries and limits. And, like, for example, like, we were in between LA and San Diego because my roommate lives in LA, and we were potentially coming here for the weekend just to visit, but I had all my things in tow. So if we signed a lease, I could, in theory, drop my things off, all my personal belongings in the space, but that wasn't certain. So I asked if I could leave my 3 bags at her place for that weekend. So probably like 3 days, max 4 days, because I was like, I can get an Airbnb. It's just I need time to figure out where that Airbnb should be. Also, I'm working, so it's just until I can get an Airbnb where I can move my stuff. But yeah, like, again, it's interesting because I understand and respect her boundary, which is, no, my space is quite small. Like, I just don't want 3 large bags there. Totally understand, but does that highlight something that I see as not problematic within our friendship, but it definitely changes our friendship? I now know Sam is not as close as other friends. This is not a friend I can rely on. This is not almost, I would say, community. Why? Because the difference to me between community and like close friendships is reliance, right? Like, I think a lot of the times if we're talking about like BIPOC community, an immigrant community, there is so much reliance on people who look like you, who know your background, who have the same or similar culture as you, that like it's almost an understood that like at some point this person could be asking me for help and I will assist them to the fullest degree that I can, like within my means. And so I think to have that boundary drawn and me probably realizing what it means, but for her probably not realizing what it means. I don't know if it means that I need to have a conversation with her or like just kind of leave it, you know, because it is what it is. Like, I'm not asking her to change at all. Like, I don't want her to change. They're her boundaries. I wouldn't want her to feel uncomfortable. But for example, the flip side is Fatima has been spending the last literally every free day that she has been spending coming to view apartments. As a consequence, she did not pack up her apartment. When I arrived in LA, everything was in place. So she was really stressing out. And I literally turned to her and I was like, what do you think I'm going to be doing? We're packing this place together. And we did it in like 2 hours. So it's like, you know, things like that I feel like are just like understood within most BIPOC bases, BIPOC communities. It's like, oh, like you help a friend out, help someone out. But yeah, it's just kind of like this individualistic aspect that like I'm not accustomed to. I mean, I guess I'm accustomed to it, but I don't want it to be my way of life. So I like make sure I'm aware of it and try to stay away from it.
No, absolutely. And then just for context for our listeners, Anna was living in Veracruz, so that did look a little bit different. I think where my brain went with a lot of that is there's this cute little comic that I have, and I'd like to, well, I don't ever, I'm in the bad habit of like not decorating, again, for the sake of like, I'm not going to be attached. This is like going to force me to, you know, pack up and go, and it will be simple to explore for later, whether that is helpful or not. However, it's this cute little like illustrated thing, and it's just, I think it's like in a bakery, and so like the one person says to the other who's like either some clerk or baker or something like, "Sir, have you been helped? Have you been helped today, sir?" And then the like customer turns back and looks at him, and it's like, "Every day of my life." And then it's just both of them smiling at each other. And I think it's really, really so sweet, but it helps remind me of a good amount of things. But yeah, there's this reciprocal or reciprocity in cultures like ours that, of course, there's a lot to say about it. So this is just tip of the iceberg of it. But there is that like, I have been helped, let me help you. So it does seem to be like more open. And I kind of think, I feel for Americans when they travel to third world blocks, they're like, the people are so generous. And it's almost as like, that's amazing. They are poor and they will help you. And it's just like, I think it highlights a lot of how in the States you don't really see that off the bat or as prevalently as in other places. So those are just some thoughts that passed into my mind. And then the conversation of like, so like for the friendship, like what does this do? Because I've been on Claudia Rankin Kick, and just revisiting her book of poems, Citizen and American Lyric. I know she does, there's one part where she like mentions it, although at this rate, but in the point of her book, it's like a friend has said something that is like at minimum a microaggression, at maximum obviously like sheds light on a lot of internalized racism of this friend. And then the way that she just describes like the way it changes the relationship and the non-fallout of it, even though it's something that is felt, but it's not something that is really discussed ever. And not to say that this is an experience with your friend, but that's just what it reminded me of, kind of like how do we deal with this. I forgot what sociologist, if it was a sociologist that coined it, but this living between worlds. I don't know if you feel like that has been your experience, but for me a lot it is, and I feel for a lot of like immigrant children too, it's like neither here nor there. But then, at least personally, I'm kind of getting to a point where it's like, okay, like let me create a home out of myself and like construct community around myself however I see fit. But I'm going to turn it back over to you because otherwise it's just going to be rambling.
It's just a bunch of rambles. Well, basically what I'm saying is like they're like in the creating of your own home as like a third culture kid, right? As a first gen. Or just someone who's really integrated in other communities and cultures within the US, which isn't like white led, right? Or white centered. I think like, yeah, like you take a little bit, and I think you're seeing that a lot now, especially within the Latin community, where people are voicing, like our generation are voicing or identifying more of the problematic structures within like Latin society or Latin community, and like how can we better it? Like it's not all bad, it's not all good, it's just how can we make it more equal? And like one of the ways that I think about that applies to the situation that I'm with my friend is that, for example, like living in Mexico, I literally saw like my friends, my neighbors, like say yes to everything. Like anytime anybody needed help, they said yes, but immediately like on the terms of the person that needed the help, which like in some cases, that's the only way it can work, right? Like there are instances where things are do or die. You can't negotiate like, oh, what time can I help you? Like, no, it needs to be right now. But like, for example, other little things like, I don't know, like picking something up or picking someone up or like something like that, or an exchange or whatever, those sometimes are just kind of accepted without consideration of like, what else do you have to do today? Like, blah, blah. And then you have the stress that comes with like now rearranging your day to help someone out. And so I think like a healthy medium is almost being like, oh, I can do it between this and this. Does that work for you? Like having a conversation about it rather than just saying no. And on top of that, I think that's more for like that. I would apply more to people who have this understanding already, right? In the case of my friend, like, I think for her, she really did consider, like, will it impact my way of life to have these bags in my house for X amount of days, right? And in that consideration, she was like, no, like, that would impact my life. That's my boundary, right? So to me, like, I wouldn't want to challenge that. I wouldn't want to be like, oh, well, what if they're outside, blah, blah, blah. No, I think she is emotionally intelligent enough that, like, she considered that, and ultimately it was a no. So, yeah, it's almost like there's, like, a bunch of stuff at play, and, like, who am I to, like, ask someone to, like, change their mind? And I think that's the difference. Like, I don't see it as, because also, like, in Mexico, there's definitely a societal pressure to say yes, because you will seem like a bad person. Like, you will seem like people will talk about you. Like your family will talk about you. And so you need to accept the request because there's almost like the societal pressure. Here, not so much. So it's like, okay, what do we do with these like new parameters that are like more fluid and like work around everybody's needs, and who do they apply to? Because I realized, oh, like it doesn't really apply to Sam. But then like I was like, oh, that sucks, but whatever. I just need to like reassess that friendship. But if like my roommate were to do that, I would be like, wait, what?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this topic of baggage is really important in how we can apply it to, as we chatted about yesterday, be it like operating in the DEIJ or Jedi space and doing the work and the baggage that comes with really being on the front line, since it doesn't seem that a lot of people talk about that at all. I think that there are some parallels in this story and what we have encountered. But before completely just doing a 180-degree turn, I did want to say, yeah, it brings up too like generational divides of like the children of immigrants and this holding on to culture and cultural values, and how, at least in my experience, my parents did a lot to admonish like the Americanization of their kids. And they're like, you know, to be American was definitely used as an insult. And it's almost checking myself at times to be like, wait. What is binary nowadays in terms of just like, this is good, this is bad, this is black and this is white? I feel there is so much gray space with everything. And so while there are components of American culture that I really don't like and try to not embody, it's also recognition that it can't all be bad. And so again, it's almost just like, so where does this leave us? How are we situated within it? And I guess I wanted to bring all of that up to say, like anything, it's a bigger conversation and not enough time to just chat about it in these spaces. So kind of leave that there, but I don't know if you feel good transitioning. We're also now we are just two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl. Now we're just two black boxes on Zoom, so I'm not able to read any cues or signal any cues to be like, hey, yeah, are we good to move on?
See if this works now. But yeah, we're good to move on. I will leave it at, I mean, there is something to be said for anyone, right? In like immigrant or not. But like there is still, and I hate it, the American dream, right? It's now changing, right? Because it's so evident that so many of us can't have it. But it's like, this is literally like almost branded in the United States, and the repercussions of it is the formation of culture around it, right? So the American dream is to have, you know, your home and your nuclear family and your white picket fence and your like garden and whatever. But think about like what that like does. It literally is a small castle. Like everyone's entitled to their small castle and their small family. Literally, like everything's meant to be in a packet of 4, right? And so that I really do think is unique to the United States out of like everywhere else I've lived. And like, even though it is an adaptation of like colonization, like Europe doesn't really subscribe to this either. Like Europe actually has intergenerational living a lot more than the United States. So it really is like the United States who created this idea. And like now we're seeing just kind of how that bleeds into culture, because now people are like, oh, okay, like everything's more individual. Like you get this by yourself. There is merit in getting something by yourself. And yeah, we can kind of leave it at that, because I think it just like summarizes where all these feelings are coming from. They don't come out of nowhere. No one's just born to be like, no, I won't help you. It's because, you know what I mean? There's just like a vibe in society that's like telling us that we should
Yes, everything is socially constructed. I am terrible at moving on and keeping conversations going, so not lobbing anything backwards. But I do remember, like, living in this quote unquote downtown area has brought some new experiences to me, particularly seeing like the issue of houselessness, like more like I wouldn't have thought, and I know that that stems from really ignorance or naivety and how they go hand in hand. But to see that and to see how it plays out, I just remember I've had these thoughts like walking from the garage that I with my car back to my apartment of when we are kids and children. I feel everyone has that little activity where the teacher asks you to draw or envision, what the future ideal, not ideal society, they don't use that language, but like, what is the future going to look like? And I remember, we put flying cars and we do all of these things. And when you grow up, it's like, what is an ideal future world? That everyone is housed, that everyone has healthcare. It does take time to even recognize, like, wait, what was all of that? And what was the point of that schooling? Or just how did these systems get internalized? What can we pinpoint that? What does it look like? And then to your point of, yeah, a lot of people, there are so many people who are willing to help, and even, like, I think that the desire is there. I don't know if I can say generally or not with people, but then it is looking to how did the systems in place shift what is accepted, what is the norm, and what does it look like challenging the norm. But then ultimately taking this baggage analogy, how do we do that when we are sometimes weighed down as people of color into these spaces of environmental spaces and conservation spaces, particularly in the US, where so many of these projects came from racist ideology. National Parks, I think, was Madison Grant, and he was big on eugenics, and his work really influenced Adolf Hitler. He called it his Bible. So we're operating with or interfacing with organizations that are like, oh, maybe we should consider race as a problem. And I think everyone else here is just like, yeah, in fact, you should. But then it comes to moving beyond just like, okay, I guess we'll have a DEI initiative. How do we do that? Some organizations will call in Lacy Consulting Services, and then we get pushback. Well, also another thing that I wanted to say, and I clearly forgot about, is if you wanted to very quickly talk about your background, because you have alluded to living in various different places, so I know it will be difficult to condense it down into a 60-second explanation.
Basically, it started with I just love to travel. I've always really loved to travel. Thanks to my dad working for United, I had travel benefits in high school, starting in high school. And I used those to my full advantage. And once I got into college, I realized that you can do a lot of traveling for like subsidized amounts as a college student. You just have to figure out where are the grants and apply to them. And also my college really like supported their students like traveling abroad and stuff like that. So once I finished college, I was like, okay, how can I do this for longer? And a way to do that is to work abroad. However, there are various ways to do that. Obviously, people listening might think, okay, so you get together with a business and say, get your business visa and blah, blah, blah. No, there are several other ways to do this. And I think what I found out was like, what really opened the door was that like, there is any way to create your life. You just have to figure it out. The world is so big, someone is doing something somewhere. And so if there's something you want to do, you can probably find it. And so yeah, I knew that I wanted to take a break from marine biology, which is what I went to undergrad for. I've always really loved like kind of the intersection of, I don't know, human resources, social science, economics, that kind of thing. So my first job was in Brazil as a program coordinator for a school, like more of like a, I don't even know. I guess it's a school, but it's almost like after school. So it's like we help the kids with homework. We get them set up with different resources if they need it. It's more like a fortified daycare because a lot of parents work past the school time. So we are coordinating with the schools drop off the kids, and then the parents come and pick them up later. So that was really interesting because I thought it would just be what I just explained. But no, it was located in Rocinha, which is the biggest favela in Latin America. And with that comes a lot of social aspects. There was a lot of really what my job was, a lot of social navigation is the best way to put it. And then from there, I realized that I needed a break. So I went diving, which is usually my break. I usually like kind of do a job and then go for a break, which is diving. So this pattern repeated for up until last year. And yeah, so I've worked in like all kinds of different spaces, like conservation and environmental education spaces, where we like took kids and groups to like biospheres or just like protected areas to show them these principles. I worked as a dive master for a while. In working as a dive master on a very small island, I just kind of naturally gravitated towards like, what are people doing with conservation there? Like, what are the people from that island feeling about the impacts of tourism and stuff like that. I've also worked as an alternative livelihoods is the old name, but now it goes by income diversification program coordinator in Mozambique. That one, again, I thought I was going for one job. It actually has a lot more social components. So what I realized through all these experiences is like, you cannot have conservation without social components. You cannot have human resources without a social component. And I think all of those experiences gave me like just a really good understanding that, like, again, kind of how we talk about nothing is black or white, nothing is binary, everything is fluid all at once, everything everywhere all at once. And so yes. So yeah, that's my background. I hope I did it under than 60 seconds. There's some other jobs in there too. I just can't.
No, I love it. Part of me is like, that. This could have just all been about your background. So sorry that it wasn't. I will say you did get your master's at some point in there, right? And yes. Your master's was like, the program itself was geared almost to be international. So part of it was living elsewhere and doing projects.
Yes. Okay. Yep. Yep. And it also had it was completely international. So it was based out of Belgium, the University of Ghent, but I never went there. I literally don't know Ghent at all. And so, yeah, instead it was based in Portugal, Italy. Then the pandemic hit. I wasn't able to complete my last semester in France, but I did go to my internship placement, which was in the Philippines. So.
Okay. Very cool. I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think exactly that in different ways came to that same conclusion that you can't separate resource management, conservation, any of these efforts without considering the people in the communities that are embedded and intertwined. There's no easy separation. So while it is, I don't know how I feel. How do you feel? In the part of me is like, I suppose I could be hopeful at the fact that there is recognition and a movement and push towards incorporation of the human dimension. Part of me, though, does feel like, what do you mean we're only starting to put the pieces together, like directed to the people, in the room who have the power, while I could also come to some conclusions as to why that is. Like, power likes to be kept in power. So it's trying to, like, detangle how much of this has been intentional, how much of it hasn't. And again, like we said, it's kind of here maybe less of a blurred line, because when we talk about park systems or national parks, there is very much Jim Crow in existence that intentionally excluded people from these spaces. And while there was likely a question in there, I think that I'm getting a little off track. So I'll leave it to the first one of just feelings.
This topic, we also had like baggage and DEIJ, but I think they can be connected because it's almost like what I realized in those spaces, and also I also had a job at an NGO. It was refugee resettlement. So them too, is that because power lives in certain spheres, then it like only leaves a little bit of wiggle room, resources, assets, whatever you want to like adjunct to power, for these areas. And so that has like such a trickle down effect to what these spaces can really tackle, and like why I want to say we are such an afterthought, because people are just trying to like get their core, like their primary thing first. And like in the ways that I've seen it are, for example, like the person who started the organization that I was an income diversification coordinator for, they are really well known in the marine biology space as the primary researcher of manta rays. And I just think about how not only must it have been very difficult to establish yourself within the marine biology circuit as a female, but like also as the primary researcher. Like if you need to do any type of research with mantas or elasmobanks, like you have to petition with her. And like to establish that could not have been easy, right? But in that establishment, I know, because I've seen the impacts of it, that there were forgotten impacts, but that's because there was also a person fighting for power on the opposite side, if that makes sense. And so it's like so difficult, because you're just like, was it wrong? Was it, again, living in the gray space? Was it wrong? Was it like bad? Well, I don't know, but I think what counts now, it's like, are you really willing to make up for it when people point it out? And back to the baggage analogy, and like these companies, organizations we work with, it's like please don't be shocked because you came with your baggage at the door. You should know that you have baggage at the door when you're coming to us. And if you don't want us to go through it, you definitely aren't here for the right reasons. And I guess like maybe that warrants like more of the lift that we do at the beginning that we talked about in our consultant for consultant meeting. But yeah, like it's almost like, how do we operate within the limits of, because they're also entitled to like be like, let's say in the NGO space, to be like, hey, like we just have so much on our plate, like we are just already, we don't even know how we're going to keep the lights on, like let alone like identify all these problems, like we just need to use DIJ to keep the lights on. Well, no, that's a problem there. No, I'm sorry, we cannot help you. But if once you have the lights on, you have mouths fed, you have taken care of yourself, now we can like help you out, because our jobs are more to like constructively get somewhere rather than be fed into the loop that has been processing for years and years and years and years and years. People are acting like, BIPOC activism is brand new, like created in 2020 because racism ended when Jim Crow did. No. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was trying to go at some point, was almost tying it in less well than you did. So thank you for weaving it all together like that. Is a lot of articles or publications that I've seen are starting like that, like in the wake of the George Floyd murder. Environmental organizations have almost had a reckoning. And to me, so now it feels like it's in vogue. And there is something that prickles me about that. And there's something that's like, it took brutality in its most extreme form that is experienced by so many people of color, people worldwide, for you to think, hey, let's connect the dots. Like, why did it have to be so extreme? And maybe it's because I'm cynical I feel like it was, I don't know, almost like at this point it was impossible to continue ignoring. But I am left dissatisfied with that because it is the recognition then of, yeah, so you were ignoring it. But I think to your point of coming to the door and being like, yeah, we were, and we are ready to do better. I think we have clients that come to the door and say, almost have a sign that's like, I'm ready to do better. And then we're like, okay, let's go. And they're like, oh, I thought that we wouldn't have to. So,
with your comment, like, it's so interesting how you bring that up. So on the drive down from LA to San Diego, there's this like beautiful coastal highway. It's like green, there's wildflowers, you can see the ocean, there's like look off points. I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. There's like mountains on the left hand side. And then it just like smacks me across the face that I was like, this is native land. This is indigenous Mexican land. And I was like, I literally was like, and this was violently taken. This was violently assaulted, and then once it was taken, aggressively like cleaned of brown people and indigenous people that like were protecting this essentially through their way of life. And I feel like that is now 2, 3, 4 generations, iterations of cleansing, of taking, of colonizing. And then, that's even before what we call like, civil rights era. And then we have civil rights era, and then we have the California riots, and then we have now. So what is it between all those different times where things were brutal, things were on fire, things were violent, and now that it can't be ignored? Because I kind of just want to know. It won't make me feel any better, but I just like inquisitively want to know. Is anyone quantifying this? Because please let me know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It doesn't feel good. And sometimes I'm like, I feel it only doesn't feel good to us. Whereas it's almost like, la di da, I am having such a great time experiencing life, not worrying about anything. It is all about me. It's my world and you're just living in it. And so I've brought up W.B. Du Bois to you a lot, but again, like this different positionality, we're screaming from another side of the color line, and people who are on the opposite side, I don't know if it's that they can't recognize it. I'm not sure. I feel this will be a lifetime of exploring these topics, but in Du Bois's writing, he has a very powerful example of like, it is just throwing yourself against this glass and nothing shatters except for yourself. I don't know if he had actually that last part, so this was me taking some liberties, but that's what it feels like sometimes, It's like nothing shatters except for yourself, and trying to, the way I've begun to conceptualize this process is, and it could really start anywhere, but it's rupture, reconfiguration, and then reconciliation and recognition exist almost in this, they orbit each other. And so I'm not sure really in which direction to go, but likely, there's a point of rupture. Then there has to be that point of putting the pieces back together of this reconfiguration of self. Then it goes into probably a recognition, or almost like a re-recognition of like, I'm back together, only to be ruptured again. And so I'm not sure if it is that is that putting back together? Is that recognition? Reconciliation? Does reconciliation go before recognition? How does it work? But I think the stronger feedback loop is between rupture and reconfiguration. And so it's rupture, reconfigure, do the work, continue, move on, take breaks, try and be okay, don't be okay, emerge, and feel, I think I'm okay. So I've experienced that a lot in this placement, and I'm really grateful for it because it is this unraveling and putting pieces together of different forms of my life, because especially here in this space, there is no, for me, and I think for you too, clear, distinct separation between personal and professional anymore in terms of this work. It's so, at the core, important to just, I think, our project of existence and what that means and what that looks like. So trying to transform the space of conservation, which for viewers out there, I think that is in part the mission of Lacy Consulting Services. I've had to do a lot to come to the conclusion of how people, at least in this capacity of an organization of 10, less than 10, can we be transformative or truly radical when we exist in this very neoliberal, racialized capital web? And to me, the answer is no. But I feel, and this was really informed by the piece that I have in front of me, which is on the colonial way of being. And of course, I don't have the cover page where I could have just pointed to who wrote it. But it is on, well, the piece itself isn't on intervention, but where I drew a lot of this inspiration from was this season that, okay, so we can't transform, but we can intervene. And intervention in itself with the dialectic material conditions of our shared and constructed reality, that in some way I would like to think alters what exists. And so like intervention points are the inroads to transformation. Just transformation is a big, long process that we probably won't see until if we make it as a society, and if we don't just go some, if we don't just ruin everything before then. So it's almost like giving power to intervention. Like this is what we can do. We can intervene, and in its way, it I hope can slowly lead to transformation. But sometimes it's hard to like even lean into that, where it's just like, man, it's getting under it all.
I feel like it's almost like this is all like up here, noodles, and there's like smooth pasta sauce down here. Sometimes you can get under, but then you get like pulled back into the noodle soup, and then you get sometimes back in pasta sauce, back into the noodle. Like consistently being in the sauce would be cool, but now I'm thinking maybe there's no way to consistently be in the sauce. You're just always in the noodles, which is contrary to my saying, which is always lost in the sauce. So I'm gonna have to figure
lost in the sauce that the noodles made you believe was sauce, but it's not. It's noodles.
It's noodles.
And that's the ending of our podcast. Thank you very much. we will be wrapping up, but it's hard. How do we, this is again Claudia Rankin thinking. I don't know how to pronounce anything, viewers, listeners, but a lot of trouble that she had ending her book was like, how do I end something that does not have an ending? And that really had me thinking a lot about the incompleteness of revolution. And I can tie in these, but it will be messy and make not a lot of sense. So maybe a conversation off the air of, on top of doing all of this work, on top of arriving with baggage, on top of being hit in the face with baggage sometimes, and you're like, hey, it is also the fact that the movement never stops. It is always, you always have to keep going. And I think that, like we've discussed, there is some good in that, and there is some challenge in that too.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, there's some good in that. That makes me feel good. That makes me sleep at night. Definitely. And maybe it's like that this, like, yeah, ending these podcasts is really hard, but it's just like, or these conversations are really hard, but it's nice because these types of conversations are like specifically the podcasts that I look for, right? They're very hard to find, like, honestly. And what I like about them is that they then inspire conversations with me and my friends. And so it's almost like a rolling yarn ball, a snowball effect of like, more people are expanding, more people are thinking about this. And I think that's really important because it is, I don't even know what to say, bleak out there. And so it is nicer. Like, yeah, I'm just in my bag. But then listening to these conversations, it's almost like a safe way, like a safer way for you to, like, you know, think about these things in a protected context with people that you very much choose and feel comfortable with. So yeah, like, yeah, take forth of these conversations and turn them to other conversations.
Yeah, especially because, and this is more my doing than anything, we have a lot of unanswered questions in this. I almost hesitate to lay them all out because this is probably going to be cut down. Part of me is going to be like, no, have it be the whole hour that it was put out there. But, you know, what is a very broad question, like what is community? But we kind of didn't get back to like, how do we situate ourselves within it? How do we operationalize it? What does it mean? How does it derive value? To what does it look like? Not for Jedi work, not simply in the sense of community engagement, but also what does it mean to do this kind of work? And I think you only start to get a sense of it once you're in the middle of it. So there's a lot of focus on DEIJ initiatives. There's a lot of research about how necessary it is. But what about the research on what it does? I think there are some emerging themes, but it's also being cognizant of the effects, the rupture points, the breakdowns that happen for the people who are tasked to do this work and who oftentimes do not receive support or even have just basic expectations met when it comes to dealing with clients, when it comes to then, you know, we have to handle microaggressions and not only like deal with them, but be able to name them, to articulate them, and to work with someone who you feel is unreceptive to any of that. But then past that, it's really what are our personal projects? What does it mean? What is it for each of us to be radical, to be on the liberatory path and journey, which is long and challenging, but circling all the way back, when you find community, makes it all the more worth it. So I feel like I'm going to get sappy there. and just wanted to see if there's anything that you wanted to throw in there. I kind of tried to do a little summary of the various topics that we went through, moved through, lobby back and forth to each other.
Oh, I think that was a good summary. I feel like there's a lot of questions to answer the questions. So, I feel like all this stuff is very much in the category of like, there are no answers, but it lives in gray. So there's an answer until you create a new answer, basically.
Absolutely. Kind of gets me into Audre Lorde's Poetry's Not a Luxury, the essay, not the book. Recommend people to check it out because there are some things that I won't get into specifics here. And I did want to leave, though, on a note of gratitude because as this placement starts to wind down, I will be... I am definitely getting into feelings, but I think that I can keep composure in this space. But I did want to say thank you, not only for teaching me so much, for being my supervisor, but I know I remember like the first day, I think I started with on a Wednesday because it was team meeting day. And shortly thereafter, I was like, Leander, I need to work with Anna. You have to make it happen because who is this person? They're so amazing. They're so cool. They're articulate. Like, you need to make this happen for me. And he did. Leander's the boss, by the way, for people tuning in. And yeah, it's just been really, really valuable to me to have someone like you who in not different ways, in some ways, like just getting at me, like someone who vaguely looks like me, who occupies the world, is like fellow, like brown human being, Latina, whatever it is. It's really made all the difference. So thank you for being you and showing up and being able to, work together. It's been the best, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I could literally do a whole nother podcast on how much I loved having you on the team, like literally. And I'm serious. I don't like talking about it because I don't understand what this is gonna look like without you. So.
Yeah, so we're going to ignore that because that's a coping mechanism too. I will be, like I told Leander, I will be calling back to Lacy Consulting Services. It's just a matter of knocking out that capstone. So it will be a little break and then I'll be back because I can't. How to leave this space? I can't.
Actually, that makes me feel better because I advocate for breaks. And the type of breaks I advocate for as well. So that makes me feel better. That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah, and like by break, it will be me just trying to produce thousands upon thousands of words just to be like, oh, that capstone is done. Give me my degree, please. Please let me go. I'm done with that. Thank you to all of our sponsors listening and viewers like you who make this podcast possible. People are going to hate me, but I don't know how else to end, so this is where we're going to go. Thank you seriously for your time. I think we can take the fathom off. Yeah.
Oh man, we should have created ridiculous ads.
Yeah.